a little bit about these collaborative organizations.
Oh, Andrea, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
There. Have I been on mute the whole time?
No, you just.
Okay.
No,
Good.
just that last minute.
Just when I switch slides, thank you. Yeah, so basically the 5 themes, a collaborative organization has been used and sort of as a tool by many different communities to help solve a wide variety of societal needs. And it is now being considered widely in the ocean observing community. For some background, if you're interested in some reading, I've now put this white paper up on the working group Google Doc folder, but there was an OceanOBS 19 community white paper by Bob Weller et al. Titled The Challenges of Sustaining Ocean Observing. And it's a very nice report. And as John mentioned, as we speak, a 3-day workshop hosted by the National Academy's Ocean Studies Board is concluding on this topic. They will indeed produce a report. They said it would probably take about 3 months for that. So we'll be looking for that to come out. So let's just talk very briefly about a collaborative organization. What are the 5 conditions that when aligned tend to produce effective results for distributed groups handling very complex problems? Basically a common agenda, pretty obvious there. Participants need to have a shared vision for change, make sure that everyone understands that that's a common understanding, and have a joint approach to solving it through agreed upon actions, generally speaking. But more generally speaking is have an agreed upon agreement on what they want the impact to be. I think that's probably the most important takeaway in this point. So shared measures of systems, basically the development of shared message measurement systems is essential, as this keeps efforts aligned, it holds various players and partners accountable, and it helps others in the organization learn from successes and failures so that the organization can learn and move forward. A third thing are mutually reinforcing activities. By design, these initiatives are going to bring together diverse groups of stakeholders and people working together. So you don't necessarily want to bring these people together, have them all doing the same thing. You want them to bring to the project and to the effort their particular expertise and hone that in on the problem at hand. And again, this all needs to fit underneath an overarching plan so that you can move through successful phases. The 4th thing is a continuous communication, and of course, consistent and open communication, as we all know from everything else, is required to become sufficiently familiar not only with the players, but to understand and appreciate common motivations among the different goals of the organizations. And finally, a backbone support organization. And I, having been a project manager for 3 different ocean observing projects, this has been in each one of them, but it has looked different in every one of them. So, but it is important. But basically it's required a separate organization with staff with a specific set of skills honed in on what is needed for this effort. And it requires a recognition that this takes time and it's not just sort of a volunteer effort and if it happens, it's okay. But this can be one of the most predictable avenues for failure is not having this in place. And as well, it also creates develop a structured and trustworthy process for effective decision making. So what I would like to do now is to introduce you all to each other, the panel members. And so we have here, like I said, a group of very diverse folks. We have Michelle Hupel, say? Heipel.
Nothing like it's spelled.
I should know from working with Susan Weifels. It's like, and she is the director of the Australian Integrated Marine Observing System, or IMOS. We have Jerry Miller, who is the president of the Science for Decisions Corporation. We have Sosi Sayeve, who is the CEO for the Partnership for Observation of the Global Ocean, or POGO. We have George Patahaikas, who is chairman of the European Global Ocean Observing System, or EuroGOOS. And we have Carly Weiner, who is the Director of Communication and Engagement Strategy at the Schmidt Ocean Institute, as well as John. And as mentioned before, we are joined by our two early career professionals, Maya Delaney, who is a PhD candidate at the Albright Stonebridge Group, and Isigi Kadagi, who is Director of the Education for Nature and Conservation, the WWF USA, Billfish, WIO, and the African Billfish Foundation. So quite a heady bunch. Also on this panel, but not here today due to one timing and the other just a conflict, was Brad DeYoung, who is professor at Memorial University, and he will be representing the Atlantic Observing System project that was funded out of the EU, Atlantos. And then we will also have Louise Newman, who is the project executive officer, for the Southern Ocean Observing System, or SOOS. And she's also located down by Michelle in Hobart. So next, what I would like to do is move as quickly to a brief overview. One of the events that will happen during this week is most of the work will be done online in Google Docs, and I will create, based on our conversation today, sort of a framework or an outline document for you to work from, so that you can come in, give examples, vignettes, just say what your experience has been with this various elements of things, as well as weigh in on opinions and recommendations. But we will have an event on Wednesday, the 23rd, and that will be hosted by our two early career professionals. And so they wanted an opportunity while we were all convened to talk a little bit about what that session will be about. So I'm going to turn it over to these two young ladies.
Sure, thank you very much, Andrea, and it's great to meet you all. As was mentioned, my name is Maya Delaney. I am an associate at Albright Stonebridge Group, a DC-based consulting firm where I work on the sustainability practice. I'm also from the Bahamas, so marine and ocean issues are very near and dear to my heart. And my colleague Nellie and I just wanted to quickly preview a topic that we hope to explore with you during our working session on next Wednesday, the 23rd. And it's about practical implementation of the best practices that we discussed to a very urgent problem. So currently, many small island developing states and coastal countries have found their economies stunned by the pandemic. Ecotourism, which in some cases accounts for up to 50% of GDPs, came to almost a complete halt. And small-scale fisheries activities was dramatically curtailed due to lockdown orders in many countries as well. However, we truly think that the pandemic presents a unique catalyst to explore other industries that are equally reliant on the health of our marine ecosystem. And through growth of the sustainable blue economy, new economic avenues suddenly open up. That said, none of that growth is possible without two items. The first being a strong foundation of ocean observation to inform optimal development of marine industries that do not disrupt stability and the health of the marine ecosystem. The second is strong cross-sector partnerships to ensure that latest findings in ocean observation are funneled through and understood by all sectors. So I'll turn it over to Nellie to just say a bit more about what we hope to hear from you on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya, and thanks everyone for making time to be here. And I'm just excited to be joining this for the first time. My name is Nelly Isigi Kadagi. I'm the director of the Worldwide Farm for Nature, Education for Nature Program and Conservation Leadership. I also direct the African Billfish Foundation, where I've spent the last 10 plus years studying the migratory routes for billfish in the West Indian Ocean region. I'm originally from Kenya, and so the ocean is very close to me. I've spent so much time working with fishers, fisherwomen, and so this is a topic that I get excited every time somebody mentions the ocean, but at the same time, it gets sad when we see what is going on. Building on what Maya has said, we're really looking forward on Wednesday to hear from you about your views on ocean partnership. And in the context of this very ongoing discuss on blue economy, where countries are jumping in and saying, let's take over this next frontier for economy. And Africa, for example, the African Union has registered this as the next frontier for African sustainable development. But from your views and experience, we would like to hear, how can we explain the role of partnerships in your work experience, and how does this roll into this ongoing discussion on blue economy? And then when we think about best practices, how can we apply those best practices for ocean partnership within the observation community, within the sectors? And one of the areas that I've really worked on is communities. And we will be providing 3 papers. One of the papers is a paper we co-authored 2 months ago, looking at the African experience when it comes to blue economy. And as John said, we are thinking about ownership. And so blue economy for Africa, based on this paper, we suggest that it cannot work if communities are left out. And that's the ownership we're talking about. But of course, there are other sectors. And so it will be interesting to hear what is missing in this ocean partnership for blue economy growth. What do we need to do in this COVID situation and moving forward? Because we can't just stay in the pandemic. We have to think about the future. And as we said, we are paving way for the next generation of ocean leaders. Last but not least, Maya has said that she's from the Bahamas. I'm from Kenya. I've worked across the island nations in the Indian Ocean. So how can this work on ocean observation inform how small island nations or coastal countries can recover from COVID-19? And lastly, how can ocean observation partnership be built across the scales when we think about global North and global South? So as I said before, I'll be sharing 3 papers. It's not homework for you, but I think it will just give us an idea on how can we roll in and narrow down into this subject, but at the same time, bringing our global perspective as well as our local perspective into one unified way that we can come up with recommendation. So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to Wednesday with so much engagement and energy. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my thinking that if all done right, that this would be a beautiful case study to start vetting throughout the community. So I really am looking forward to Wednesday. And it's funny, I hadn't thought about it when we started talking, and the more I sat and listened to the 2 of these people, I'm like, but of course, we need to take that deep dive and have that drilled down conversation about what does this actually look like. And so hopefully this will start that. So at this point, if I'm looking at the proper place for the chat room, Nellie, I'm not seeing any questions, or are there any in there? Do we need to stop for?
Not really. I have not seen anything.
Okay.
It would be great if I could see something.
Yeah, no. And I see there is a question. Yes, we are recording the meeting. So. Okay, so what I would like to do is just sort of do a roundtable discussion and talk about sort of the role of partnerships in each of your organizations. And I'd like to start with maybe just a kind of a 2-pronged question: is what is the role of a partnership? And then what are the advantages? And then next we'll talk about challenges and places where they haven't worked, and what are the obstacles that maybe need to be overcome that we need to maybe make sure that we address during this next week. So if we could maybe start on a more positive side of what is the role within the work that you do, and what does it allow you to do that you wouldn't otherwise do, recognizing that's only half of it. So. To keep things simple, I will call on folks if that helps. So I'm going to start with Michelle. I know that you work across all of Australia, which is a highly diverse place, and you've got a lot of various stakeholders around the various ocean space in your environment, and a lot of very diverse community within that space. And so can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you face and how the partnerships do benefit?
Sure. Look, IMOS is founded on a partnership. The group was established with 7 main partners. And for us, we have a huge marine estate. Our marine estate is actually larger than our land mass. So we've got a lot of area that we're trying to cover. We don't have a huge population. And if we don't work as a partnership, if we don't work as a team, it's not going to work. We couldn't possibly do what we do with one institution. No one institution could cover all of this area. They won't have the expertise to do, all of the elements that we need to do to actually have a successful ocean observing program. So for us, it is absolutely fundamental that we have this broad group of people that are working together, that have a common goal, that are, trying to achieve something collectively for our country and, to understand our oceans. For me, that takes on an even bigger level, having worked with, in my previous career, before I came to IMOS, having done some work with Pacific Island countries and understanding the limitations, and it's equally, the situation is the same in the Indian Ocean. We have a lot of regional neighbors that don't have the capacity and the capability that we do. And I think we collectively have a responsibility to partner within Australia and to serve that information and to share it with our regional neighbors, but where possible to also try and partner with those countries to try and help, where we can. So I think, if I look back at your slides about what the different roles are, for me in the IMOS office, we're the backbone support. My job is to help bring these elements together and to help manage the partnership. And these ships, these partnerships have a lot of different levels. They have a lot of different layers. My goal is to try to bring the partners and the community along with us, and for all of us to work towards a common goal. I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. We're working on leveraging off of each other and using the strengths of the various groups that we have around the country. We do need to do more, I think, in bringing in the Indigenous elements in Australia, and that's something that's very, it's apparent, and it's something that we're working on at the moment. But I think globally, a lot of us are struggling with, how we capture the whole of the community's interests as we go forward in these programs. So I think we need all of those perspectives, and we need to focus on working towards that as we go forward into the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Thank you. My mouse is sticking out. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. I agree. I mean, I was saying that I have not met you before, but I had worked extensively with Tim over the last, many years, and always enjoyed sort of reading the annual reports that came out of IMOS, and just, the vast and thoughtful work that you all did to, bring the community people together that needed to be together to make IMOS successful was indeed profound. So I commend you for that, certainly. So next, I would like to turn to George. And, while Michelle works in Australia, so one nation, but again, in an environment, you have the pleasure and the challenge of bringing together organizations from across Europe, some of which have varying degrees of observing capability, maybe even, you could tell me, interest in. So I'm sure that there are probably partnerships that are difficult to either forge, or some that you have to forge in order to be a success. Is that true, or what is the role?
Thanks, Andrea. Well, Europe is all about partnerships. That's why it was built in the first place. So, and a big driver in these partnerships is science. And Eurogoose has a key role over the last 20 years in trying to organize and build those partnerships in the operational oceanography community, As you mentioned, there are different capacities between the members. I mean, now in Eurogoose, we've got 45 members, 45 in research institutes around Europe, all around Europe. And trying to actually make this whole system work, this very variable system. We thought that a regional approach would be the solution. So we have organized this partnership into regions. So we've got the Mediterranean is one, the North Sea, and so on, the Baltic, which these groups work on regional issues. And at the regional level, there are not big differences in terms of capacity. We have big challenges because we have member states that they invest a lot, while on the other hand, on ocean observations, on the other hand, we've got states where the observing systems are not so sustainable, they are under threat. And also we've got countries, especially in the South Med, where the capacity there, they don't belong to the EU, but we share Mediterranean, for example, that there is very, very little capacity. And another challenge that we face is that trying to partnership with industry. This is something which for us has always been as a quest. We're trying to see, to find clever ways how we can partnership. Although we know that there is an interest from, obviously from the industry, it's very hard to sit on the same table and start discussing. But we are rather optimistic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and can you talk a little bit about your role within Goose, and does being a Goose GRA, is that a partnership that is a benefit, and how does that help your member nations, if you will, work together when maybe they may not have been able to do so otherwise?
Yeah, it helped a lot because it gave us the roadmap to start working on. Although as a GRA, as you said, we basically were focusing the first years on operational oceanography. And there is where you will see big achievements on the RUSIs for the end-to-end, the whole value chain, not only observations, but also product data, products, and so on. The last few years, now we are on the new strategy and we're fully aligned with the Goose strategy. So we are working on the climate as well as the ocean health. And we try to that our RUSIs are also aligned with this strategy. Speaking about challenges, another thing that we want to achieve in the years, in the next years, is trying to bring together different communities. For example, we have the MSFD, the Marine Science Framework Directive, which is a policy, European policy, and we've got a mechanism there that they go, they observe, but they're very little connected with the operational community. So this, again, it's one of the challenges that we want to bring the various communities that they perform ocean observations, they do science, and sometimes these people, or the people are literally are sitting in the offices next door, and they're in the same institute, but they don't share data, they don't speak, they don't align their observing effort. And we believe that if we achieve this, we will save money, we will have money for more observations and better observations. But certainly Goose has been the driving force.
Oh, that's good to hear. Awesome. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is we're going to shift gears a little bit, and so go from folks who are managing observing networks or observing programs. And is Jerry still on the, I can't see all of the participants while I'm sharing my screen. So is Jerry still with us?
I think Jerry left as soon as he heard you're going to call him.
That stands to reason. We know the type, don't we? Okay. Well, then let's skip to Sophie. Again, as you mentioned in your sort of your intro to me when we were kind of putting together the flyer, is that indeed your name starts with partnership. And so you bring together all these members from across the globe to think about and do better ocean observing. But then at the same time, you also manage projects and programs globally where you partner people together who haven't already achieved the goals that you're trying to get them to achieve. So can we talk a little bit about the challenge attached to those partnerships and its importance and how it's of benefit, please?
Yes, thank you. You may have noticed I switched off my video at one stage because I was having some internet issues. So I'll try and do this with the video on, but if there are problems, I may have to switch it off again.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks for asking me to comment. And you're exactly right in your introduction that POGO is essentially a partnership of oceanographic research institutes who basically got together 20 years ago to really try to pool their resources and to work together to prioritize particular areas of ocean observing that needed attention or that could benefit from really having a coalition of the world's major research institutes behind them. So one example of this that we often mention is the Argo Program, which was getting started around the same time as POGO. And that was really one of the very early priorities of POGO to get all the institutes. I can't remember how many institutes were in POGO at the time, so maybe sort of 18, 20, to really put their focus and their weight into deploying these Argo floats and really getting the network started and getting it to grow. Another example of an early priority for POGO was to support the Ocean Sites network of time series stations, which has also been very successful. So I think the role of the partnership has been very important in really getting the members, so the institutes who are really the ones who are deploying instruments and maintaining observing systems, to get together once a year to agree at the director level which observing systems really need to be prioritized and to agree to do this together. Another important aspect of POGO is advocacy. And again, it's really the partnership that makes this successful. So many of the institutes who are members of POGO and their directors, they feel that if they take a statement or a document from POGO that's kind of been signed by the 30, or now we have around 50 member institutes in POGO, it makes their arguments a lot stronger if they're going to their governments to argue for the need for funding ocean observing systems, and they take a statement that's been signed or agreed by all of these other directors of research institutes from around the world. They feel that that this lends a lot more weight to their arguments, notably for the need for funding for these systems. And then the partnership aspect also comes through in our capacity development programs, where again, we make use of this network of research institutes that we have to provide training for early career scientists, particularly from developing countries. So we have programs that allow these scientists to visit other institutes within the network, to receive shipboard training. So again, we have access to research ships and research cruises from many of our member institutes. So this really provides platforms for the training and expertise to be able to provide this training. And then the second aspect, which you mentioned, Andrea, is also that POGO partners with other organizations, particularly international organizations like the IOC and GOOSE and IODE. We also work very closely with GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, and with SCORE. So I think in POGO, we recognize that each organization has its own strengths and weaknesses, and that it's important to identify a niche for each one, a very specific role and mandate, but also areas of overlap and synergy where we can work together. And this is very much what we do with some of the partners I mentioned earlier. And one thing POGO's been working on recently with GEO Blue Planet, the Blue Planet initiative within GEO, is to develop a platform. It's called Oceanscape. Some of you who were on the National Academy meeting earlier may have heard Albert Fisher talking about this. So it's a web portal that's designed to clarify the kind of alphabet soup of organizations, such as the ones that we all know, like IOC and SCORE, etc., but also things like trade associations, professional societies, some of the organizations represented on this call, like Eurogoose, and I think the Consortium for Ocean Leadership are on there. So it's really looking at who all the different organizations are, what they do, what their missions are, how they're funded, but also what the relationships are between the different organizations. So I think that aspect is very important when we're talking about partnerships, is to actually understand who we all are, what we're all doing, and how we can work better together.
Yeah,
so I'll stop there, but yeah, no, I was just going to wrap up there and invite you to look up the Oceanscape. It's just oceanscape.org if you want to find out more. Thank you.
Yeah, that was one of the things that kind of came out of the framework for ocean observing out of Ocean Obs 09, was sort of this, when you want to enter the global arena, or you think you have observing that you want to sustain and move it up through the chain, how do you engage? How do you do that? And so this Oceanscape sounds like a great way to get a sense of who's doing what, where are they doing it, and what's appropriate in terms of linkages. So I had heard about it about a year ago, I guess. But yeah, I did hear Albert talk about it yesterday. So it's good to see that it's moving forward. So excellent. So Carly, are you still with us?
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm still here.
Okay, great. Again, I can't see you. So I know that Schmidt brings together various groups from around the globe to do, again, a myriad of innovative work to accomplish things that they've never done before. And in many instances, they may not have even worked together before. So I guess I just want to ask you, what is that process by which you form partnerships among these people? And or when you're just basically, engaging with the folks that you are funding, how do you develop that partnership, and what is the process, and are there sort of, if you will, some strategic directions that you give yourselves to make sure that there are things in place to better guarantee success?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's really nice to be with an esteemed group of people working on partnerships. And it's a really interesting topic for us in particular, because we're sort of shifting to a more strategic plan around partnerships in the work that we're doing under our new leadership with our new executive director, Dr. Jyotika Vermani. Previously, we've had sort of informal partnerships as we bring the scientists aboard our research vessel to conduct science globally. And what's interesting is, we're bringing together scientists from different countries, different institutions, and also different fields. So a lot of the work is interdisciplinary work where we're bringing together people that haven't necessarily worked together before. And that's created for really rich collaborations, but also challenges in permitting, data sharing, everything you can imagine. And so as time has gone on, we've learned a little bit more about how to engage in these collaborations. And we've called them collaborations actually from a legal perspective and not partnerships, as you know, they're temporary work that's been done on a ship. But as we look forward, we're starting to establish more directed partnerships and growing those networks. We are a small entity, and so being able to create partnerships is allowing us to have further global reach and do more work. One of the things that we're really particularly sensitive to is trying to make sure that the data we're collecting in the regions we're working in is being used by local scientists, policymakers, marine managers. And so one of the ways that we're finding this to be effective is through local partnerships and engaging early and often, not just while the science is taking place or after the fact, but ensuring that we're making sure there are early partnerships established, and not just for permitting purposes, but to make sure there are local artists, students, and scientists aboard to ensure that the data that's being collected is being used locally. And we've had some really successful examples, not all the time to be perfectly honest, but there's been a couple really great examples for the work we've done in Indonesia, our campaign in Australia this year. So I think there have been some great models that we are using moving forward in formalizing and making these strategic partnerships. We also realize that we can get further by collaborating with others, and we've had formal partnerships established with larger groups, especially as we enter these big decadal initiatives with Seabed 2030 and the UN Decade for Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development, as well as with the NOAA Office of Exploration and Research. And so, for example, Ocean Exploration Trust, NOAA's Office of Exploration and Research, and SOI have been working collaboratively to develop a new education platform where we're taking all of our seagoing deep sea educational materials and putting them together in one spot. And that's something going underway right now. So it's not just the science collaborations, but also our public facing and education work. The other initiative that I think speaks to what we're talking about here is that we last year brought together all the philanthropic working operators for research vessels together for the first time to create a working group. And why this was really important is there was oftentimes we'd go into port or we'd be working in an area that we thought we were the only ones there. And sure enough, we'd be passing Ray Dalio's boat or someone else's boat and be like, hey, you're doing work here too. Or we'd be diving on a location that we thought we were the first ones to explore it, and there'd be Mambari pink flamingo on the bottom of the ocean. So it was an important way to be able to coordinate not only our cruise locations, but also to help each other to strengthen our relationships and help with permitting, with collaborative science, and also not with the data, right? Because all of this data being collected, we all had different ways of handling it, processing it, and trying to better use the public repositories and international groups to have that data accessible and usable. So I think I'll stop there. I don't want to talk too long, but certainly can speak to more detail about these partnerships at any point.
Yeah, it's interesting the choice of language between collaboration and partnership. I did an engagement plan for one of the projects I managed, and at the top of it, which was a very specific thing, was the partnership. And that was the caution. It's like, well, if you're going to partner with them, you've got to be willing to change the goals and the direction and the priorities of your project because they're a partner, and so it was one of those things where it's like it all sounds great and you're all moving toward this common thing, and then suddenly you realize this is a marriage. It's a two-way street. And so I'm sure that having to formalize it is very important because otherwise you just get off the rails very quickly.
Yeah, not her.
Pardon? Okay, so that's all of our panel members. So I've kind of done the roundtable. Do Nellie and Maya, do you want to ring in on this topic? Or I'm seeing no from Nellie, and Maya also no. All right, so do we have any questions in the chat room?
We had one question and maybe a comment from John White. He says the US sees Australia as an exemplary builder of partnerships with Pacific Island nations. I wonder if others share that impression, and I hope we can learn a lot from you and your organization, Michelle. So that was a question to Michelle, and Michelle did respond on the chat to say that there's still a lot to do, and they are taking a step at a time. So I don't know if Michelle, you would like to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I would just add, if there are anybody else, you know, like you, Carly, or others who work on the international front, who sort of have this same impression that Australia's done a great job of sort of engaging many of the island nations, responding to floods and disasters, but also helping advance ocean observing and ocean science and research at large.
Well, if no one else is going to chime in, I guess I'll, my perspective on it is that our ocean is their ocean. You know, it's all connected, and the more we can learn collectively, the better we can all do. I said at the start that Australia has a very big marine estate. So do some of the Pacific Island countries. They're very small landmass and a very large marine area that they're trying to manage. So, if we don't work together and leverage off each other, we're not going to get there. There's only so much money to go around. And I think, the kind of things that Carly's talking about, trying to get the philanthropists to come together and, coordinate where the vessels are going to work and how things are going to operate means that we can all do more collectively, by just talking to each other and, making sure that we know what's happening in different areas. We can try to make sure that we're not duplicating and replicating each other. And, as a collective, then we all win because we learn more. And through sharing that information, we can go farther.
And just to add on to Michelle's point too, that collective grouping isn't just within the philanthropic world. Across the different types of entities, it makes a big difference. So when you can work collaboratively with local governments and the private entities, it kind of creates this holistic perspective on the work that's being done. And so I think that's important too, to not just kind of stick your partnerships within like entities, but kind of work across the board. And we've had a lot of success with that in Australia, working with CSIRO, as well as the local university institutions. And everyone's been really collaborative, and we've made some great headway because of that supportive environment.
And before we close here real quickly, does anyone have any real feeling about sort of these 5 elements of a collective organization model? Is this something as a model that you think we should try and further vet, or, and say that this could, if you're looking to create partnerships, this is a good place to start with as a best practice, is look at these 5 elements, think about, do you have resources to develop them? And if so, the odds of you succeeding go up. Is any thoughts there? Because we're starting to run out of time, but we have 5 minutes left. Yeah.
I think if you can't, if you can't meet those 5 things, you're probably going to struggle. I mean, depending on the size and the scale of your partnership, but if you're talking about a big integrated partnership, those elements are absolutely foundational and critical from my perspective.
John, you were about to say something, or were you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that is true. I think there are different levels of structure with all those elements. But when I look at Sophie with the organization of POGO and how over time that has now developed into more of a structured framework to accomplish the great things that you've done. You know, it'll be interesting to explore, you know, how did you do that? What did you codify? How did you bring the pieces and parts together? Georgia, same thing with what's happened in the EU and certainly with Goose framework. And then you, Carly, I think, and what you mentioned, bringing the ocean-going philanthropic organizations in one room for the first time. I looked at in the U.S. to have the Scientific Philanthropy Alliance, which is sort of a larger, again, group in there. I think they're trying to find their way. They've sort of dedicated some resources to build that foundation. But if there's a way to look at the best practices and lessons learned amongst all these efforts around there, I think you could really start to get to some sort of, you know, some epiphanies of how to build those elements, but how they can also flex in terms of how much time, energy, resources, and people that you throw into which ones. But the key part of this, I think, is, you know, having ongoing communication and collaboration, you know, amongst all the members with, again, the shared goals and agenda. That you got to have just shared that and really just continue to engage. And again, I go back to you, Sophie, and Pogo. I've always been impressed with how you guys have managed to do that, even before there was a virtual convening world. So I think now we can do it like never before. So that's my take on it all. But I just, you know, when I was listening to all of you talk, I just think some great examples out there to really get after some best practices. And I think we're only scratching the surface of what the great knowledge that you folks and many other organizations represent here.
Thank you, John. That's a great lead in for closing. And I'm going to move to the next slide. Is that what I would like us all to do over the next week is to go to the, and I can resend this to you, to the Google Docs, the shared environment. And based on this conversation today, I will create sort of an outline that will, you know, just ask you simple questions that you would answer. If they're not relevant, don't answer them. But if they spark an example or something that you could weigh in on, do that. And again, this is designed to be a 2 to 5 page recommendations report. So there's no need to write great prose here or do anything, you know, that prolific. We really just want the examples and the ideas that they're out there, and that yes, indeed, this is a potential pathway forward. And these are the reasons why or why not. So having said that, and then of course, we want to see you Wednesday if we can for a deep dive on the sustainable blue economies. Any other closing comments from the group?
Andrea, just really quickly, when you're putting together the document, I think one of the things that's missing from that model there is evaluation, having shared metrics of evaluation. Okay. So you might want to put something in there to start.
I was just going to make a suggestion, kind of in response to John's comments. It kind of made me wonder if we could maybe try to see if we can populate that framework with the 5, I can't remember what they were called, but the 5 kind of key elements of partnerships. If we could, each organization that's contributing could kind of add under each one, you know, this is what we've done in terms of continuous communication or whatever, and kind of look back at, you know, for Pogo, we've kind of been making things up a little bit as we were going along. I don't think there was a grand plan in the beginning with, you know, 5 bullets under which we were going to develop partnerships. But it could be interesting to look back at what we have done and if and how it fits into this framework. And it might be that Pogo, you know, focused mainly on 2 of these, but Eurogoose focused on 3 others and so on. Just an idea that just popped into my head.
No, and that's sort of what I was picturing. George, did you have any closing comments on what?
Well, I was thinking all these partnerships, and I was thinking how Europe, for example, has evolved. And one thing that possibly it's worth mentioning here is that at the same time that we are building partnerships in Europe, we are also competing. You have competition between the partners. And although you would expect this competition, for example, for the European calls, project calls, to be working on, weaken the partnership, that's not the case. So we've got different people, different institutes coming under Eurogoose. We have this partnership there, and at the same time, we've got a very strong competition going, which is interesting to look at as well.
Right, how to overcome that or build it into positive exchange. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we are at the end of the session, so I think there's a break for everyone. So I know we've been at it a while. And I just wanted to say thanks to John and Maya and Z for the work that you guys have done getting us to this point, because it's really been very helpful, because I'm a lowly project manager, and so it's just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. But I will say, because I've worked on the OOI and the Deep Ocean and Tropical Pacific, is that if these 5 elements were not in place, the project did suffer. There was an element of it that just wasn't working right, and so we had to fix it. So that's sort of what brought me into the idea that this is probably a framework worth trying to socialize a little better around the community. So there's that. Any final closing comments, John?
Just thanks to you, Andrea, again, and Maya and Nellie for leading this effort, especially going forward. I think it's a great opportunity to capture a lot of best practices. I hope all of you will participate in this virtual sharing of ideas. Sophie, loved your thoughts about, let's look at the 5 elements and think about how organizations, and I would say look at the ones that we know of as well. And then I would say also look at things that have failed. We learn a lot, but we don't always go in and codify. And sometimes we try not to talk too much about our failures. But boy, I've seen it over and over again where we keep making the same mistakes. So if we can sort of circle some of those as well. And I mean, one of the big ones is I think in the past is, again, we've gone to industry and some of the other partners we need and looked at them much more as, a resource provider, and just, well, what don't you understand about how important this is to you, instead of welcoming them in as partners and say, help us in a collective impact to design, structure, and build the future. They have ownership opportunities as well. So that's, and I've seen it again where you just have the wrong conversation. And Carly, I know you know this probably better than all of us. Effective communication a lot of time begins in making sure that you recognize people, at the right level, and you're going to them with the right type of attitude. So anyway, just one example, but I really, really appreciate it. And thanks a lot to all of you who've gotten it up at various times of the night and day around the planet. And again, thanks to you, Andrea, for leading this. You're just a program manager, but you already had great impacts in many programs across the ocean space, deep and shallow. And I know this is going to be one of those. So thanks to everyone.
Very good. Thanks you all. Thank you, John.
Bye.
Have a good weekend, all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Later.
Thanks.